All right, good afternoon from sunny, not London. So, this is the first stream that we have done, not in the shop, but for understandable reasons, we are having to adjust the way that we do things. I couldn't stream yesterday because we had a number of staff that obviously had to work from home, and we were in the process of trying to make all that work. So I am pretending I'm in the shop. Hopefully, you like the background. I don't quite know how it's going to pan out for everyone, but let me know that you can see and hear me okay, and that the picture's coming through and the sound. I've got a very similar setup to what I normally have at the shop, so hopefully this isn't too distracting. Hi John, I'm going to keep an eye on the comments as I go along as well, and I'm also going to show some of the pictures, the wonderful pictures that you've been uploading onto our Google Drive. So without further ado, I've had loads of comments. I actually have not had time to go through every single comment, so if I haven't replied, I'm really sorry. It's just been slightly insane. Obviously, changing the rules and not letting people travel and things like that has meant that we've had to really get very clever on how to keep the shop going and how to continue servicing everyone. Just to explain for anyone that that's great, Robert, thank you, and hi Sarfaraz, and hi John. That's really great to have you here. I'm just going to very quickly see if there is a warning on my screen. I don't think there's anything I can do about that, unfortunately. It is just what it is, so we're going to carry on. If at any point something drops out, then bear with me. I will try and keep it going for the duration of this stream. So essentially what we're doing now is the staff are not physically going into the shop, but we still have deliveries happening once a week, and we still have collections from our couriers. So if you are in need of anything, you can still use the online shop. You can call, although the phones are being redirected, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It seems to really depend on how the phone is feeling. Today it's not working, so thankfully I haven't had any missed calls, but if you do want a call back, then our staff can call you from their own phones if you need technical support or anything like that. So that's just to give you the current scene with Grays of Westminster. We did send out a little email yesterday just to let everybody know what we were doing. So all my staff are very happily safe and sound in their homes, and in my case homeschooling whilst also answering emails while also streaming. So loads of fun. We like a challenge. Hello David, hi Jim, lovely to have you with us today. So to crack on, I was thinking about photography at home, and a lot of people have posted pictures to the Drive folder, which I will go through shortly. It's really nice to be able to just take a step back and think, what can you do under the current circumstances? Obviously, if you're allowed a daily walk and you're able to get out and you're not one of the super vulnerable people, but you can still keep your social distance, then you can go out and about and take some pictures while you're doing it, get some fresh air in your lungs and have a walkabout. I am going to do that a little bit later once the kids have finished school, which is at about 3 o'clock. So we're going to do our family exercise time. So you can do that. Also, from your garden, I've noticed a lot of people who have gardens and have bird tables are doing a lot of bird photography. So I'm going to talk about that shortly, and I have a surprise to show you very shortly. A few people have started venturing into macro. Just going to do a quick shout out. Hello Richard from Norway, nice to have you with us. So some people have been interested in macro for a long time. Certainly myself, I have a number of macro lenses, and it's something that I've been very passionate about for a long time. Other people have never done macro, and they're just starting to leap into the kind of the macro world, and it's quite interesting how it makes you look at pictures differently. Now, one thing that is very important to know is the closer you are to the subject, the shallower the depth of field. That's the case whether it's macro or whether it's portraiture or you're doing zoom, you're using a 70-200 zoom, anything like that. If you are, let's say, for example, if I find something that I can use as a sample, here is a lens that I have. This is my old 105 2.5 that I think I've talked about a number of times, but anyway, here it is. So the closer I am to this subject, the less is in focus, the less that there will be in focus. You might have, for example, the depth of field might be a centimetre, but if I'm further away, the depth of field will be greater. And that's the same with flowers and with people and everything. So when you're doing portrait work and you're focusing on the eye, if you're too close, all you'll get in focus is the eye. Whereas if you are a bit further away, you'll get more in focus. Now, obviously, a lot of people want to be close for portraiture. They want a shallow depth of field. But if you're suffering with the fact that only like the tip of the eyelashes is in focus, that can be quite annoying. So the simple thing to do if you're using a macro lens and you're finding that the depth of field is way too shallow is just to take a little step back. This is why sometimes people prefer to have a 105 macro, because they can be further away from the subject than if you're using something like a 60mm. Now here, this is my D850 with the 60mm 2.8G, and the other day I was taking photos. I don't think I've uploaded them to the drive yet actually, but I was taking photos using the extension tubes. I don't know how good this is going to be, so let me just see if I can show you on the back screen a with extension tube shot. Now I don't know how much you can see of that really on this camera, but essentially this is a dead stem from an anthurium flower that I have at home, and the only portion in this frame that is in focus is over here. And because I was using an extension tube, I was about half a centimetre away from the flower, whereas if I was able to, you can't with extension tubes, but without the extension tubes, with just the straightforward macro lens, I was able to get way more of the plant in focus. So that's one tip for your macro photography. And obviously if you want to cheat the look of a shallower depth of field lens, let's say you have a lens with a variable aperture and you're stuck shooting it at 5.6, but you kind of want to cheat the look of a 2.8 lens, just get a bit closer to the subject and you will get a shallower depth of field. The way that the bokeh looks when you do that obviously varies from lens to lens, but sometimes you can use that as a little cheat. Hello Nikos from Cyprus, thanks for joining us this afternoon. So that's with and without extension tubes, you've got quite a shallow depth of field anyway with macro lenses, but even shallower if you're using an extension tube. So I have a set of extension tubes here. Now these are the Kenko ones, which are slightly odd lengths, 36, 20 and 12mm. And they're the ones that have the chip in them so that I can use them with my autofocus lenses and retain all of the information going into the camera, which is super helpful. If you want to use a Nikon extension tube, as I've spoken about before, you have to use a lens with an aperture ring. I did have a gentleman who takes amazing pictures all over the world of endangered species, including bats. And he was asking whether extension tubes would be a solution to get him closer to the subject. And I answered his email directly, but I thought it might be interesting for anyone who does want to focus much closer. There's two different ways to do it. You can do it with a teleconverter, which effectively increases the focal length of your lens. Or, I mean, that's kind of like putting a little magnifying glass between the camera and the lens, and then you're kind of just increasing that focal length a bit. Or if you want to get physically closer and get that depth of field and increase the magnification of the subject onto the sensor, that's where an extension tube comes in. So hopefully that makes sense, but essentially the teleconverter increases the focal length of the lens, while an extension tube increases the magnification of the subject onto the sensor. They're two different things, and you can certainly use the extension tubes to get physically closer to your subject, but if you can't get closer to your subject and you want to create the look of getting closer, then it's a teleconverter. So they're horses for courses, as they say, two slightly different things. I won't forget, I'm going to periodically mention that we have this super chat function. So if you want to donate to the coffee fund, you can add £1 or £2 or £3 or more in there, and that will contribute to the future coffee fund, because our local coffee shop is now closed. But we'll be sure to cash it in when everything's open again. So if you're happy to support us, then please do, and we appreciate everyone who has supported us so far. And as with all of our streams, if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments. I will keep an eye on the comments for you so that I can see who wants to know things that are not necessarily relevant to what I'm talking about. Andy says, yes, I brought the shop to me. This is a shot I took of the secondhand department. So I thought, I feel right at home. I can just pretend that I'm in the shop. And then you can pretend that I'm in the shop too. So I'll try not to wear green, otherwise it'll get very confused, and then I'll just become the shop and be the living embodiment of it. So I also have here a 1.4 teleconverter. So I thought I would just, I don't have an easy ability to show you pictures while I'm actually taking them. I will try and hook up something, maybe using an HDMI cable or something like that, but don't know if my poor old computer will be able to handle that. But I've got a Z6 here with a nice big screen, which should hopefully give you an idea of what I'm doing. So I'm just going to put on my 60mm onto this Z6, and then you're going to see what it looks like. Actually, I can't put the 60 onto the converter. I'm just going to do it without the converter first. I have a special lens to put with this converter. That's why I've got the converter here. It's not the 60mm, it's something else, which I'm looking forward to showing you very shortly. So let me just change the display here and take a picture. So not super exciting, but a picture here of the spines of my collection of Nikon owner magazines. Let's pop it onto stills, that would help. Okay, so I've taken a shot and I will show you a before and after. So that is basically just a picture of the Nikon owner magazines on my shelf. The green screen's getting very confused because half of those spines are green. Now I'm going to put on the extension tube, and then you'll be able to see this. I'm going to use the maximum extension tube here. So let me just make sure I put it the right way around. It's really simple. It's almost like it fits on the same way as a lens would, really. You see that? You just put it on like that, and that's the extension tube. Looks like that, and then I'm going to put my 60mm lens on there. On a Z6, it does make it look quite a formidable looking beast, actually. So same, goodness me, now I have to be very, very close to actually get my closest focusing distance in. Right, as I say, lots of green spines on there. That's going to be really hard. Yeah, so the shop's going to blend in to this picture. So it's going to look like the shop is in this picture. This distance here, if I can shade it slightly, is without the extension tube. And this one is with the extension tube. I'm going to upload those pictures so you can see, because essentially I went from having to be a foot away to suddenly needing to be about half a foot away. So that extension there actually halved the closest focusing distance. That's kind of useful to know. I'm also, when I get my special lens out that I'm going to show you, put on a converter with and without so that you can see. Oh, Super Chat doesn't offer you the option to donate to the coffee fund, Nick. Now, I must sort that out. Hopefully my lovely assistant is also watching my stream and she can fix that from behind the scenes, because I have no idea how to fix that. This is why I leave these things to her. She is the master at fixing the bugs. Let's just see here if I can see that. It should be there. It should be there. I'm going to ask Fatini to fix that for you so that you can, at some point during the stream, donate to the coffee fund. And in the meantime, I will make my own coffee at home. Thank you for the sentiments. All right, so that's just something that you can do and something which might be useful. Yes, the electronic. So Andy, that is the electronic Kenko extension tubes that I was talking about. They come in a set of 3. They're slightly different lengths to the Nikon ones, but because they also have the little chip in them, they'll transfer all the information. So these are very, very useful just to have. They're not super expensive either, and I think you can buy some more generic ones that aren't Kenko branded, for example. You can just buy extension tubes. If you just look for Nikon AF digital extension tubes. You just have to make sure you include the word digital so it works with all of your lenses. Then you can find them relatively inexpensively on Amazon and eBay. I mean, the thing is that these things have been around long enough that there are manufacturers in China, for example, who have started making them super cheap, so you don't have to completely break the bank to get yourself a set of those. I believe we have a set of genuine Kenko ones in the shop, although ordering them is going to be a little bit difficult at the moment. We can, if you want to let me know, I can add it to our online shop. That's the only way that we can do it currently. So that's just one of the things that you can do to shoot at home, as well as, obviously, I'm going to mention a little bit about bird photography shortly. This kind of is all encompassing with the topics that I wanted to discuss anyway. So when it comes to telephoto lenses, it very much depends on what your budget is. So if your budget is below, let's say, £600 or thereabouts, then the lens to look at is the 70-300. If you've got a DX camera, you can buy the DX version, or if you're full frame or thinking of going full frame, you can buy the FX version. The FX version is the AFP 70-300, 4.5 to 5.6 E. That's one hell of a mouthful, but there you go. So that's the one that I would recommend for that. And I did actually do a shoot. I'm trying to think if I've got the magazine here which has the pictures in it. I don't know if I do. I do at the shop. But I did a trip to a wildlife sanctuary, actually the Big Cat Sanctuary, which you might have seen on the BBC. They did a whole documentary on the rescue of big cats there. And the main photographer there, the head photographer, is a lovely lady. She's a client of Gray's, but she's also a very dear friend of mine. And she took myself and my mother around the Big Cat Sanctuary. And I took the 70-300 just for the simple reason that I didn't want to carry loads and loads of lenses. I carried that, and also, just because I like to have choice, the 70-200 with a teleconverter, just to see what I would prefer. And to be honest, I used the 70-300 for 90% of the shots that I kept at the end of the day. So if you want a really inexpensive but good quality telephoto lens, then it's the 70-300. If you've got one of the older cameras, then AFP lenses don't work on all cameras. They only work on the kind of last few years of generation. So if you're not sure if your body works or not with it, please do check the Nikon compatibility charts, or just ask me and I will tell you whether or not it will work. So that is for a bit of a budget, the 70-300 AFP. If you want to go next level up, let's say, and you want something a bit longer, then you can have a look at the 200-500. I'm going to just make a note of these, just so that you can see. So this is I think the 70-300 AFP. Oh gosh, it's grey. There we go. 70-300 AFP is about £520 for the full frame version. So that's budget one option. I'm also writing it down so I can include it at the end of the stream so you can look at the links. Option 2 is the 200-500 f5.6. Now the beauty of this lens is about £1,200. I think it's a little bit less, but there you go. So 200-500 5.6 AFS E lens. Beauty of that lens that I don't have here, but I have something else, is that it will take teleconverters. So now, the thing with teleconverters, and here I have the TC 1.4, hopefully you can see that, 1.4 Mark III. This is the newest of all of their teleconverters. The thing about these is that they reduce the aperture. So when you put a teleconverter onto the back of your lens, if you've got a 2.8 lens and you put a 1.4 on, then you're going to lose a stop. If you put a 1.7 converter on, you're going to lose 1.5 stops. If you put a 2x converter on, you're going to lose 2 stops. So generally speaking, Nikon have not made teleconverters to work with lenses that would lose too much quality. It is a heavy lens, John. There is no doubt about that. The 70-300, honestly, I know this is not it, but it doesn't look or feel much heavier than that combination right there. It's about that long when you stick it on the front of a Z. While the 200-500 is a colossal monster. But in terms of flexibility, it's fantastic, particularly if you've already got something that goes up to 200, like a 70 to 200, for example. It's not for carrying around all day. I wouldn't recommend that unless you're feeling super muscly. If you're not, then then the 70 to 300 is great because it doesn't weigh very much. It's about 600 grams. I'm just sort of smoothly transitioning over to my teleconverter topic here. So, as I say, 1.4 will lose you 1 stop, the 1.7 will lose you 1.5 stops, and the 2 times will lose you 2 stops. And Nikon have not actually made converters to work with so many lenses because you'll just lose way too much quality if you put them on. As I demonstrated the other day, and I think I've got a lens, let me just see, that I can show you here. The lens is everywhere. This is just a 35 1.4, but you can see how close the rear element is to the back, and you can't put this protruding thing here onto that. I wouldn't dream of doing that because then I would break my lens. So that's why you have to be very careful to check what compatibility there is between your lens and a converter. But there are some benefits. So the older converters and the newer converters, this one, as I mentioned the other day, they do rattle a bit because they've got a moving element. They've got a moving aperture mechanism. So with the 1.4 Mark III, this is probably the best teleconverter on the market at the moment. It loses you very, very little quality, if any noticeable quality at all. You only lose 1 stop of light. The only downside is that it doesn't work with the AFS-D lenses. So if you've got a 300 f4D or an 80 to 200 2.8D AFS, it won't autofocus with those. In fact, it may just throw up an error when you mount those. So that's the only downside of that. However, the 1.4 Mark II, which is the one just before, isn't as weather sealed as this one. This one has actually got quite a heavy duty rubber gasket around here to stop water and things going in. And it doesn't have an aspherical element, which is what this one does have, which is what gives you those super sharp images, but otherwise is very, very good. The reason that I kind of clamor on about the 1.4 over anything is because it's the converter that loses you the least quality. You retain almost all of your sharpness pretty much. You only lose a stop of light, which isn't the end of the world. And generally speaking, you won't lose any of your AF points. When you're using higher magnification teleconverters, you actually run the risk of not having access to all of your AF points across the frame. So hence I talk about the 1.4 quite a lot. I just noticed that Robert's with us. Hello, Robert. Yes, the 200 to 500 is brilliant. And if you can get one of the sort of camera buddy harness things to keep your sort of your shoulders and back supported, then it's a great lens. Super, super flexible. So that's the 200 to 500 and the fact that it works with teleconverters. If you're going to put a 2 times converter on there, you are going to be stuck with just your middle AF point. On most cameras, you won't have access to the other AF points, and you'll also lose your 2 stops. So it's going to slow it down quite a bit. There are other lenses. Hi, Adrian. Thanks for joining us from Ireland. And thank you. So on the 1.7 teleconverter, you lose 1.5 stops. They haven't done a Mark III version of that, which sometimes I wonder if they will. I think it's due, and I hope that they do one. Yes, the 1.4, Nick, in answer to your question, the 1.4 is very good for the 300 PF and the Z6. That's a really nice combination, and will lose you the least quality. So the 1.4, if you want just a little bit of magnification, a little bit more reach from your lens, but you don't want to lose too much by way of quality, then the 1.4 is the way to go. Either the Mark II, if you've got slightly older lenses, or the Mark III, if you're not worried about backwards compatibility. The 1.7 needs an update. So although I've seen fantastic results from it, and honestly, I couldn't really fault it for the fact that it's about 10 years old anyway, but I think it's due for a Mark III version fairly soon, and then perhaps we'll see that it just retains a little bit more sharpness. If they could add that aspherical element to it, that would be great. But generally speaking, it's a good option. Loses you 1.5 stops, but gives you that 1.7. Yay! £4. £4 for the coffee fan. Thank you, it's working. So that's the 1.7. And this is a problem with me looking at comments while I'm doing this, is that I get so easily distracted. Like, oh, look, a butterfly. Right, so that's the 1.4 and the 1.7. And then the 2 times. Now, the 2 times has also gone through a few upgrades and iterations. And the Mark III came out, gosh, must have been about 10 years ago now. Possibly slightly more. It came out when the 70-200 VR2 came out. So we're talking a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago. I'll have to do my research and find out. But that was a massive improvement over the Mark II. I mean, a tremendous improvement. It was way sharper than any 2 times converter had been before. Saying that, because it loses you 2 stops, it does slow down the lens quite a bit, and as I say, you may lose your AF points, so do keep an eye on that. It's great for the extra magnification, but you just end up losing a bit too much sometimes in terms of light. So unless you're going on safari, if you're going on safari or shooting on a beautiful day like today, it is so sunny out, I can't believe it, then you can use a 2 times teleconverter and it won't slow down your autofocus that much. But if you are shooting in slightly low light, then the 2 times converter will slow down your lens, and it will struggle a bit, particularly with the 200-500 and the 80-400, which I will talk about in just a second once I've read these comments. So John mentions that the 1.4 works well on the 500 PF. Yes, you're preempting my next topic, John. And so Andy asked me, is using the DX crop on the sensor a better lower quality loss option than the 1.4 converter that you were saying just now? Actually, no, because the DX crop option actually physically crops out pixels. So rather than your frame looking like this, you're just cropping out pixels all around the outside. So hypothetically speaking, if you were shooting with a D850 and you ended up with a 45 megapixel image, let's say it was a 100 meg image in full frame, and then you switch to DX crop and you crop out all those pixels, then let's say the image would work out at about 50 meg instead. So you've lost data essentially, and you've lost pixels. That's not the end of the world, but what a teleconverter does is retains full frame but just magnifies your lens. So you may find that with some lenses you lose a little bit of sharpness, but you're not losing information out of the picture. Hopefully that makes sense, Andy. Yay, thank you, Nick. Now, Marco, who does, I have to just give a little shout out to Marco because his Instagram profile is phenomenal. And Marco, please write your Instagram handle in the comments because I think everybody should check it out. He takes these amazing wildlife pictures. I'm a massive fan of his. And he says that the 300 f4 AFS-D, yes, takes the 1.4 brilliantly. Yes, so that is a really nice combination. Now, just interestingly, between Andy and Marco's comments there, so you've got the DX crop on full frame cameras, or you've got DX cameras themselves. 2 slightly different things. So the D500 obviously is a DX camera. It was designed for wildlife and sports photographers to act as a kind of little brother to the D5, and tremendously faster focus. Lovely file size from those images. It's a 20 megapixel sensor, so it's not as extreme as a D850, but it's enough to do easily blow-ups to sort of A1 size, no problem. Thank you, Ian. Thank you for your donation to the Coffee Fund. I super appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. I will try and answer everybody's questions as we're going through the comments here. So kind of combining Andy and Marco's comments there, if you have a full frame camera, you can use the DX crop, and that's one way to get around not having a longer lens or not using a teleconverter. Alternatively, if you already have a DX camera, you can throw on a converter, you can put a long lens on there, you can do all kinds of things, and you will still maintain the DX crop as well, obviously, because that's the size of the sensor. So there's a few combinations there. In my article that I did, I wrote an article after I went to the Big Cat Sanctuary, and if I got green hands and arms, I'm sorry about that. It's just my skin colour. I'm so pale, I need more sun. So obviously it's catching the undertone of my skin. There you go. So Mark Scocco has put his Instagram handle there, so you guys can check that out in an otherwise idle moment. Yes, so I did this article on the Big Cat Sanctuary probably about 2 years ago, I can't believe, but yes, I think it was about, or maybe a year and a half ago, and covered just the different ways to get longer reach. So you've got the zoom lens option, like a 70 to 300 or a 200 to 500. You've got the teleconverter option, and then you've got the in-camera crop option, and all of those, or obviously using a DX camera and then using an in-camera crop. So you've got all of those options to get you a little bit further. The more pixels you have, so if you've got a D850 or a Z7, you will be able to crop a lot and still retain quite a lot of detail. I actually used to aggressively crop with a D700, which is 12 megapixels. Never ever had a problem with it. I mean, sometimes you're in a situation, particularly if you're shooting a wedding, and you're kind of limited to how close you can get to the couple, particularly if you've got family members everywhere and stuff. So I used to use that crop post-processing a lot on the D700. Never had a problem with it either. So you've got a few options there. Now, moving on to the next lens. The minimum focus distance of the lens does not change with the teleconverter. That is correct. So that's why teleconverters and extension tubes, as I talked about at the beginning of the stream, are two different things for two different purposes. So thanks, David, for pointing that out. So then the next lens after the 200 to 500, I would say, if you want to leap up in budget a little bit, is the 80 to 400. Now, the older version of the 80 to 400 was painfully slow to focus. I mean, you would half press the button or press your AF on button, and it would, and then by the time you've got your subject, it's flown away or it's run away because the lens was also really noisy. It was the first VR lens that Nikon ever made. So go figure. It's probably about 15 years old now. They brought out an AFS version, so AFS 80 to 400, 4.5 to 5.6 G VR. The beauty of the 80 to 400 is that it is very much backwards compatible with all of your Nikon cameras, whereas a lot of the newer lenses, particularly the ones that have the the electromagnetic diaphragm, or AFP, which have the pulse AF motor, they won't work on older cameras. While that's not a problem if you have a current body or a body that's been made in the last sort of 3-4 years. If you are using an older camera, then it's a bit annoying to buy a lens and find that it doesn't work. So the 80 to 400, when I've done comparisons between the 200 to 500 and the 80 to 400, I've generally found that the 80 to 400 is maybe splitting hairs fractionally faster, but it doesn't give you the range that you get on the 200 to 500. The longer end does make a bit of difference if you're shooting birds and wildlife, while the 80 to 400 is really like almost a general purpose lens. You take two lenses with you. You've got your, say, 24 to 70 and your 80 to 400. You don't need other lenses to fill any gaps because you got it covered. The 200 to 500 kind of needs to be complemented by a 70 to 200 and maybe something else. 24 to 70. So you could have three lenses if you have the 200 to 500, whereas if you've got the 80 to 400, you only need that and one other lens, really. There you go. Fatini is I did acknowledge them. I just like to say I am tracking with what's going on here, but thank you so much to everybody for supporting us. It's super, super helpful. So John mentions the 80 to 400 is an amazing lens on the heavy side. Yes. It is lighter than the 200 to 500 though. If I had one here, I would just show it to you and then I could show you them side by side. I can't at this moment in time, but I will when I get back to the shop. The 200 to 500 is also taller. So the 200 to 500 sits about that tall, whereas the 80 to 400 is about that tall. So there's quite a big difference there. The front element of the 200 to 500 is 95 millimeters. So you can just imagine how big that is. The 80 to 400 is 77 millimeters, so it's the same filter size as so many other lenses. So this is why I say, if you want just to minimize the number of lenses you're taking with you, the 80 to 400 is superb. I mean, it is a very, very sharp lens. If you want the extra reach, then the 200 to 500 will complement your other lenses. You can also use a teleconverter with the 80 to 400, although because of that variable aperture, again, you're gonna suffer a little bit with focusing speed and things like that. So that's my roundup of zoom lenses. Now I want to talk a little bit about primes, and I'm just going to have to drop out of the camera here for a second. So, very excitingly, about, I don't know, an hour before I had to leave the shop yesterday for good, for a while, we had a delivery of this. Points if you can guess what that is. This is a lens that was announced last September at the same time as the Z cameras, and has since been very difficult to get hold of, and we could not even have a demo in the shop until now. So when we get back, we will have a demo of this, and I have to say I'm astonished at how small and light this lens is. Hopefully you can see that. That's a 500 f5.6 E PF, AFS, VR, ED, nanocrystal coated, all singing, all dancing. Sorry, I didn't realise I had that on. So it's very, very, very exciting as a lens. And I am going to do a little bit of a thing here. I'm going to test a bit. Let me just see if I can... It's not the Noct, if only. No, I don't think I'd be able to carry that home, to be honest. The Noct is just so big and heavy. We did have a delivery of a Noct, but it went straight out the door as soon as it arrived, because we've had someone on the waiting list for it forever and ever. I'd love to do some photography at home with the Noct, but instead I've got the very lovely 500 PF, which is perfect for bird photography. I'm going to be giving this a little spin over the next few days, and I'm going to upload some pictures to the drive. I'm going to be using it just straight. I'm going to use it on the D850 and the Z6 and put it on the TC14E Mark III. I mean, honestly, it doesn't weigh very much at all. I've always been kind of reluctant to use telephoto lenses because they're so heavy. Hence the 70 to 300 is a great lens because it's so light. But this is incredibly light for a 500mm lens. The 300 f4 PF is another fantastic lens and works really nicely with the Z cameras. So on the subject of primes, the 500 at the moment is the smallest, lightest lens in this focal length that you could get, which would be ideal for bird photography and just general wildlife. There is also the 300 PF, which obviously Nikon kind of modeled this one off of, which again, beautiful lens. No complaints really. There were some issues, I will say it because it's not an unknown thing. There were some issues with the first batches where they were having an issue with the VR. The VR wasn't actually kicking in the way it should, and they had to send a whole bunch of them back and then do firmware updates, and so there was a delay on those as well. There's been a terrible delay on this. It's like, you know, been a year and a half to get these in. So that just gives you the PF lenses. There are also some other tremendously big and heavy lenses. There's a 200 f2, there's the 300 2.8, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 800mm lenses, which are all beautiful primes, but if you're going to take pictures professionally, completely justified. I'd say if you only take pictures about once a year, then maybe the bigger lenses are not something that you would necessarily want to invest in. But if you are doing it frequently and you really enjoy getting super sharp quality bird photography or wildlife pictures, then those bigger lenses are definitely another step in terms of quality. I'm glad that that John's got one of these. I'm looking forward to trying this out. It's a bit difficult because I don't have a clear view outside. I can't take pictures with it while I'm here. Oh, thank you, Brian, and thank you, Safaraz. That's really lovely. Thank you so much for donating to the coffee fund. I've got to go find a coffee shop that's open now. That's part of the challenge. So just to give you an idea of this one, the tripod foot on this one, I mean, it's not Arca Swiss style, so it's not one of the sort of quick release plate designs that you can then quickly take on and off your tripod. you might want to change that over for another one. Or, I mean, on the bottom of my D850 here, I've got a quick release plate. I could just put another one on here, for example. Just holding the lens with the converter on it there. Oop, there we go. You can kind of see, you get a gist for the size. That is also a 95mm front element. And you've also got these memory recall buttons here, which you can set to do different things. You can set them to be autofocus buttons as well. Just to show you, I don't know if you can see that very clearly. I have to get quite close to my camera here. So you've got an option to have AF on, which means when I push these buttons, the camera will focus. You've also got an option to make it the autofocus lock, so that it locks, so you half press your button on the back, or you half press the shutter button, and then you lock your focus using one of these. Or you've also got the option to preset a focus and then recall it, to recall the exact focal distance. A lot of these telephoto lenses have things like that on them. If you haven't been using long lenses, then you just wouldn't know what the buttons are for, hence I'm explaining them. You've also got these switches on these long lenses, which say sort of, for example, limit and full, or they have a distance and then they say full. That means that on full, the lens uses the full focusing range all the way up to from infinity to the closest focusing distance. If you know that if you know, for example, that your subject is going to be closer than, sorry, I beg your pardon. If you know that your subject is going to be further away than the limit, on this lens, it's 8 meters. So if you know that your subject is going to be further away than 8 meters, you just switch it to 8 meters to infinity, and then the lens does not focus any closer than 8 meters. The only reason for that is to make it as fast as possible, that's all. So it speeds up your focusing a little bit. John made a comment here on the lens. Watch out for the release catch on the tripod foot, as if it's not tight, it can fall. Yeah, it's a little bit annoying. This is kind of why, I mean, the Arca Swiss style feet that they make for the lenses are better than the little plates, because you can really feel when they're locked into place. But I use one with my D850, and I, not with this lens, but with smaller lenses, have it mounted on the D850, and I tend to not let my stuff fall over. I'm usually quite careful with it, which is just as well, because I'm borrowing this lens. So I'm going to do some tests with that, with the converter, without the teleconverter. I would say if you know that your subject is going to be quite far away, then the longer the lens, the better, really. You can crop if you want to, you can use teleconverters, but if you can get a lens already that is long, then that's great. If you really want to go to the next level, the 180 to 400 quality-wise is unparalleled, I would say. The 180 to 400, and I'm looking forward to seeing the 120 to 300, which is going to be similar quality, but is basically going to replace out some of those primes which have needed replacing over the years. So we've had things like the 135 DC and the 180mm f2.8 and the 200 f2 and the 300 2.8, and all of those lenses are more than 10 years old for the most part. 300 2.8 I think is the youngest, and that's the VR2 version is still, we're still looking at about 8 or 9 years old. So rather than replace 4 lenses, Nikon have gone, oh, well, we could do it with the 180 to 400, and we've proven that the quality is superb, so why don't we just make one lens that will replace them all? And that's what they've done. So looking forward to seeing that when it comes out. So yes, so Andy, yes, so the 24 to 72.8 Z lens, which I don't have here, does have buttons on it. A little bit different, because they don't have the same kind of functions, because it's not for telephoto work, but the 24 to 72.8 does have that digital display readout, and you can switch between the different views on it. If I had one, I would show you, but I don't, so there we go. So I covered all the topics, I think, that I was talking about or wanted to talk about, but I did want to showcase some of your images. Yes, that's the next thing on my list. Just have to make sure that I'm tracking. So let me just wake up my mouse quickly. Here we go. And I am going to switch over here to, okay, so bear with me while I do this. Here you go, now you can see me. this is my screen. Nope, don't do that. So we have a link. It will be under this video, and it will also be under one of our other videos. I think the last stream that I did. So you can add your pictures to your heart's content. I'm just going to reload it now because I'm going to show you where it is. Here we go. So you can upload your pictures here. You can also upload them into the more sort of overview folder, but I'm just going to go through the ones we've had for London in Bloom so far because some of them are quite beautiful. Unfortunately, if you don't put your name in the title of the picture, I don't know who it belongs to, but you'll know if you see your picture. That is beautiful. All the cherry blossom coming out now. Dr. Seuss's cat. That's, World Book Day. Yes. Lovely little muscari flower. Grape hyacinth. Yes, I think that, yeah. By Terry. Wonderful. Looks like it could have been taken on the macro lens. This is from Ron. Ron. Who could it be? Here with this lovely purple flower. I think I've got a shot that taken on the weekend of the same flower. I don't know the name of it. This is a beautiful Middle of a Rose by John Davis. And then we have, goodness, wow. So this is rosemary. I don't think I've ever seen a rosemary flower before. That's with the 50, 1.8 AIS and 2 macro rings. So that's extension tubes galore going on there. That's lovely. Very atmospheric. This is beautiful. I actually thought this was a painting when I first saw it. But just the colours on that are incredible. So thank you to whoever uploaded that. Let's see if it will let me show you. This could be a bit of a challenge here. So we've got the live stream. There we go. So here you can also upload other photos. So here's some, there was a mug challenge that I did, and this is also some, I'm just going to show you that one close up. These are some jewel wasps which were taken with the bellows, and I've never seen these creatures before, but they are phenomenal. This is also with an enlarging lens, which I talked about, I think, in my first or second stream. So the EL lenses work particularly well, I should say, on the bellows. And then some more people uploaded pictures into the black and white photography challenge since the other day, but I think I've gone through most of these. The only ones I haven't gone through are this one. This is also John Davis. Goodness me, that's gorgeous. That looks like selective colour used there. And then some daffs from Alan McKeeman. So there we go. As I say, please do always feel free to upload your pictures on there. I'm always happy to see them. And I will try and share them as frequently as possible with you. I'm just going to check. There we go. I don't know why I have the starting time thing on there. I don't know how to get rid of that. If anyone knows, help me. I don't know what is going on or why I have this little thing. I think it does it if you're watching it on a delay as opposed to if you're watching it live. I'm not sure. Anyway, that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about today. So I will keep an eye again on the comments once this has finished so that I can answer any questions that you've had on the stuff I've talked about today. I also have some things in store for tomorrow's stream, which includes talking about my manual focus lenses. As you know, I like to do that. Some of them are a bit worse for wear, but they are all working beautifully. Someone very kindly sent me a picture of all of their manual focus lens collection combined with some of the new stuff, and honestly it was phenomenal. So I've asked him to put it in the drive folder. Hopefully he will. And in the meantime, keep taking pictures, keep uploading to the drive, and don't forget that we have that competition this week. So it's the In Bloom competition. That's for a chance to win Georgiana Lane's book London in Bloom, which came out just this last week. So if you'd like to win a signed copy of that, then upload your pictures there, and then we'll work out a way to do like a little voting system for everybody, and we'll pick a winner for next week. So as I say, let me know if you have any questions. You can still order stuff from the shop online. You can call us, although, you know, it may or may not go through depending on whether the phone redirect is working or not, but you can certainly email us and you can certainly order online, and we will keep doing what we're doing. And in the meantime, everybody should stay safe and keep well and keep yourself very, very busy. Just quick answer to Brian, yes, we can supply the Kenko extension tube, so let me know if you want that. Thank you everybody for joining me. I will see you again very soon.